שמע שיר חדש
Okay, shalom everyone. Today is Yom Sheni of Parshas Vayera, and we are on the eve of Mama Rachel's Yard Site. Yud Aleph will be tonight. So we'd like to wish everybody who needs a special Yeshua in the merit of the Yard Site of Rachel Imenu. We can be Mispalel, and it's known that Rachel Imenu appeared to many over the years in Gaza. Specifically, people saw the image of a woman who guided them not to enter certain places, which means that Rachel Imenu's prayers are still effective and still a shmira. And what she davened for was the return of her children. And Hashem validated that her tefillos would be niskayim, mini kolech min bechi. So we are still crying. We want our sons and daughters who are in danger in Gaza, in the north, and of course, all cholim and all nifzoim, to have a special day of Yeshua. That now that finally we have reached the Yard Site of Rachel Imenu, a day of tefillah and a day of Yeshua. Okay, and on that note, we're here to thank Hashem for the incredible events that happened on last Tuesday. One day we gave a shiur one day before the election, and we saw a truly incredible event, which was the complete and total victory of Donald J. Trump, both as president, including the popular vote, including the Senate, and seemingly including the congressional Congress of the United States of America. That's a complete and total victory, and he's been given by Hashem a great, great dominion. Now let's hope that he uses it l'shem shamayim. And so the question I'll raise is, who has Trump's ear? Okay, that's the title of this year. Who has Trump's ear? Now, his ear was almost taken off, right? And it seems that the message that he received was to listen and to hear, and that's how he would be saved. That his ear was the key to his survival. So the question really is going to emerge, and this is what we must daven for. We must ask Mama Rachel to daven for us, and we must daven for it, that Trump's ear is the ear that will listen to the Eitzah of helping the Jewish people and helping the state of Israel and battling anti-Semitism. Now, there is one major concern that I will raise here. Once he was elected, he did not mention the Jewish people at all as part of the coalition that elected him. He did not give credit to any of his Jewish donors, even though he received $50 million, I believe, from his big supporter, the Adel, what's his name? From Las Vegas with the casinos. Okay, she came through. And the reality is that in terms of the Jewish vote, it was the highest percentage ever in decades and decades, maybe since Ronald Reagan. I'm not exactly sure. Or maybe since Eisenhower. I'm not exactly sure. But the bottom line is that the Jewish vote decidedly shifted towards Trump, although not mostly among observant Jews. But that's still, and traditional Jews, and Jews who are overtly loving towards the state of Israel. The others chose not to. And even many people who do love Israel and Torah and the Jewish people decided not to vote for him. I realize that. But in any case, he did not acknowledge in his victory speech anything about the Jews. This was point of concern number one. Point of concern number two is that as the election was winding down, he had a meeting. Someone got his ear. The person who got his ear was his daughter, Tiffany Trump, who is married to a Lebanese man, and a Muslim, whose father, in other words, Tiffany Trump's father-in-law, has now become the liaison of the Arab community. This includes the terrorist PLO and Hamas, which he supports, to Trump. This is a point that we must daven for immediately, because there were already many conversations that have been had between Trump and Netanyahu, and he has a new Secretary of State incoming, which they project to be Marco Rubio. We don't know exactly how strong Trump will listen to his daughter's husband's father. And like members of the community, the Arab community, who reached out to him very smartly, cleverly, because they knew that their candidate wasn't doing enough or was not going to win. So there is a grave danger here. Will he listen? The turning point in Trump's campaign was when he listened to the emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe who reached out to him, and also together with another individual, Ben Shapiro, who's a very widely listened to radio host, okay? And on the anniversary of October 7th, on the secular calendar, they visited the Ohel of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. And they offered Tfilos there, Tehillim, and he wrote a kvittel, Mr. Trump, and he wore a yarmulke, and he met various individuals who were, I believe, victims of October 7th. And it was a gesture of love and support, not only to Israel, but also to the Jewish people worldwide, because that's the Lubavitcher Rebbe's kever is not in Israel. It's a representative of positive Jewish values. Now, we know that the Rebbe had very, very specific and powerful instructions that he gave many times to Israeli leaders who did not listen. And this regarded the surrender of land and territory. His shita, his personal opinion, was to be extremely hawkish. He was one, and maybe the only one, of the great Rabbanim of the generations going back to 1978, 79. Menachem Begin didn't listen to him. Yitzhak Rabin certainly didn't listen to him. Shimon Peres didn't listen to the Rebbe. No one listens to the Rebbe. The Rebbe got a hold of Netanyahu and did make an impact on him, but still Netanyahu surrendered Hebron in the Y Accords. Very tragic. And of course, Ariel Sharon, who I imagine had audiences with the Rebbe, but I'm not sure, in terms of the Gush Katif, fiasco, tragedy. They did not listen. And I was hoping and praying that Trump followed the pattern of Koresh. Koresh declares in the book of, we speak about in the book of Ezra, in the book of Nehemiah, we have accountings of the return of the Jews from Persia to the Holy Land, and how he said that Hashem spoke to him and gave him jurisdiction over the world. Notice, King Cyrus, very much like Trump, was given a powerful mandate and controlled the entire world. You could argue that the American president is the most powerful figure on the planet, and his control is vast because they have the great military might, they have the affluence and resources and technology, so much like Cyrus. So Koresh listens to Hashem and declares that the Jewish people must go back, and specifically he enumerates that the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, must be rebuilt. Okay. And of course we know that someone got in the way. And that person that got in the way was a descendant of a Amalek known as Haman, and a usurper to the throne named Achashverosh. Once the very venerable King Cyrus, who is actually till today, the Iranian people, I don't call them Iranian because Iranian means Aryan or Nazi, and they only adopted that name in World War II to emulate the Nazis. Let's call them what they are, Persians, and an admixture of many other nations mixed in, all kinds of tribes from that region. The Persians, as a whole, were idol worshippers, but Koresh heard Hashem's voice and commanded his people to assist Klal Yisrael both materially, politically, in every way. The interference was that when Achashverosh steals the throne by marrying the previous world leader, Nebuchadnezzar's descendant, Vashti, you understand, he skipped over the Persian Empire. Persian Empire is the one that uproots the Babylonian Empire almost instantly. And Daniel's famous handwriting on the wall, that Belshazzar, who was one of the heirs of Nebuchadnezzar, brings out the Caleb of the Beis HaMikdash, much like Achashverosh would later do, and says 70 years is over, Klal Yisrael is not going back. We Babylonians have been Yoresh, this prime position in the world, and therefore we can dominate the God of Israel and the Jewish people. So what Achashverosh did was he harks back to the previous empire, Bavel, and says, forget the Persians. I'm going all the way back to the original ruler of the world, according to Chazal, and we know historically, these were the people who had world empires, and they're all primary figures in the history of the Jewish people, because Hashem wouldn't let anybody but someone who was a superlative leader in terms of power affect the destiny of the Jewish people. Because we say, Tzareya Hayu L'Rosh, we read this in Eicha, Klal Yisrael is not going to be affected by lowly people, except in the generation that we are currently in. But Achashverosh dominated the world, Koresh dominated the world, Shlomo Melech previously dominated the world, and they were all emulating the global rule of Shlomo, which was in Yerushalayim, which was in the Beis HaMikdash, which he built. That's the story of the world. Shlomo's kingdom is stolen by Babylonia, Bavel, Nebuchadnezzar. It's stolen from them, from Belshazzar, instantaneously and almost overnight, by Darius the Mede, Daryavesh, who gives over to Koresh, Persia and Media. And then Koresh says, it's time to return it to Yerushalayim. Achashverosh interferes and moves in the other direction. He emulates the true first and most powerful and most almighty figure who did recognize Hashem. It says about Nebuchadnezzar that had he said, he tried to say Shira, because I'll tell us, he tried to say Shira to Hashem. He recognized Hashem. And don't forget, he had many nevuos that were told, the dreams that were told to him by Daniel, the Chaverov. He had Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He had the cream of the Davidic dynasty with him and guiding him. He knew Hashem, and he believed that Hashem had given him the power to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, which was true, not to a nobody, not to a nothing, but to the ruler of the entire world. And the Jews were advising him and telling him what was going on. And Daniel famously interpreted his dream that he was a golden head on this monstrous figure. And then this figure would have also silver, would also have copper, and its feet would be iron and clay. This was the vision that Daniel, in the book of Daniel, gives to Achashverosh. And he says, you're the golden head. You're the first and foremost person to put the Jewish people in exile. It's going to come after you other exiles. There'll be the Persians, that's the silver exile. There'll be the Greeks, that's the copper exile. There'll be Edom, which is steel, because steel kills and can destroy all the other metals. That's why the Iron Age occurs during a biblical period, when people shifted from copper weapons to iron weapons, and those who had iron weapons won everything. That was later. So the Edomites, the Bnei Esav, as they eventually would emerge, were the sword, and they would bind themselves with klicheres, the toes of that monstrous vision that Nebuchadnezzar had, that Daniel was the only one who reminded him of his dream and interpreted the dream. Nebuchadnezzar had gathered all of his soothsayers, all of his wise men, and said, if you don't tell me my forgotten dream, and if you don't tell and interpret it for me correctly, I'm going to kill you all. It was only Daniel who intervenes and says, give me a chance. Give me a chance. They don't have to kill everybody here. And he has a machzeh laila. He has a dream. Hashem comes to him and says, this is what he dreamt, and this is what it means. All right. And later, Daniel points out the Belshazzar, who tried to take over Nebuchadnezzar's role of the successor of Shlomo Melech, and he brings out the Kelim from the Beis Hamikdash. He points them the handwriting on the wall, which says, Mana, Mana, Tako and Farsin, that the Persians are coming for you tonight. And sure enough, Daryavish arrives that evening, murders Belshazzar, seizes the kingdom, and then which goes immediately over to Koresh the Great, who Koresh the Great, unlike Nebuchadnezzar, says, go back, Jews, go back. The Nebuchadnezzar era is over. But then comes the wicked Achashverosh. Achashverosh marries the daughter or granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar and tries to reestablish the Babylonian dominance, as we know from the Midrashim, that he tried to recreate the throne of Shlomo HaMelech, which Nebuchadnezzar was not able to do, but he was able to produce some sort of replica. And he said, that's it. The Jewish people are finished. It had been, Persia will now dominate the world from here on in. And Haman, Yimach Shemo, Zichro, Zerah Malek, was the key figure in the land of Israel, and he and his 10 sons were so firm, they were the, how shall I say, Secretary of State. Haman was the Secretary of State of Achashverosh. That's exactly what he was. And he dealt with all the other nations, and he informed Achashverosh and wrote him letters saying, no, it's not fair. We have other nations here that want a piece of Jerusalem. They don't want, sound familiar? They don't want a temple on a Jewish temple on the Holy Mount. They want whatever they want. And therefore, we should freeze everything and we're going to have to suspend everything. And that's what was reversed by the triumph of Mordechai and Esther. So, who has the ear of the king? Achashverosh's ear was dominated by evil, by Haman. All right? Koresh's ear was listening to Hashem. What will happen with Donald J. Trump? We'll see. I mean, there's a good track record, there's good history, but we shall see. He has a bechira, and although we merited this incredible opportunity, will the opportunity continue to advance? This remains to be seen. Don't put your faith in human beings and in people who have bechira and of dubious character and nature. Tov liftoch Hashem, liftoch b'nedivim. We do not have control over what Trump will do. We don't have control over how he will treat the denizens of his daughter Tiffany's shver from Lebanon, a supporter of Hezbollah, and of course and the liaison to Abbas, and that's already happened. And no mention of the Jews at all to this point. No mention. It's concerning. It's concerning. His desire to be loved by everyone would, of course, lead him to want to establish a Palestinian state. He's going to want to. We shall see what happens. Hashem Yirachim. On this day, which is Mama Rachel's Yahrzeit coming up tomorrow night, we should be davening that his attention and his focus should be to what the Talmidim of the Hasidim of the Babachar Rebbe Zatzal were telling him. Put your prayers here, put your thoughts here, pray to the God of the Jewish people, pray to the Hashem. He will help you. Now, I can prove to you that the turning point of this election was October the 7th. The day that he went to the Rebbe, he was not leading in the polls anywhere. Kamala Harris had a lead across the nation. Okay, whether it was real or whether it was manufactured, but certainly where there's smoke, there's fire. She seemed to be on her way to a victory. All of a sudden, after October the 7th, things start to fall apart for them. And eventually there's the garbage gaffe. And then there was this interview in which she said she won't change anything that Biden would do. And then there were embarrassing interviews in which she said nothing. And those fashlas, those mistakes that she made, and Biden coming out against her, he came out against her. He contradicted her. He said that the people responding to the hurricane were doing a fabulous job, right? He gave compliments to the Republican governor who was in charge, whereas Harris was. And then they made, what I think was the ultimate error, to call Trump a Hitler, which was a defamation and a desecration of the Kedoshim. And of course, all that have fallen in this most previous era here in Eretz Yisrael. So they desecrated the name of Hashem. They desecrated the name of the Jewish people. He, on the other hand, was Mekadesh Shem Shamayim and went to daven. So you see the contrast that happened. And then she tanks. And not only that, but even the potential semi-victory was withdrawn. It was a complete destruction. All right, so this is what we're hoping for. This is the opportunity that we're davening for. I just want to explore one more important point about our good friends, the Ishmaelim cousins, and a previous cousin known as Lot. Sarah Imenu, right? Sarah Imenu, who in this week's Parsha gives birth to Yitzchak and removes Lot from the inheritance of being a feature within Klal Yisrael. And Avram had developed something in the past week's Parsha that's important for Klal Yisrael to know. And it goes like this. What was the marriage of Avram and Sarah like originally? The Zohar Kadosh says quite clearly that when they were, it's based on this pasuk. I'm going back to Lech Lecha, okay? So when he enters Eretz Yisrael, and he first reaches Shem and builds a mizbeach there, because Hashem appeared to him, and he said, "L'zarecha tenes haaretz hazos." Your children, okay, we don't know from which woman, but your children will inherit this land. Vayetek misham hahara. He goes there towards Yerushalayim. Mikedem lebeis el. He's being Beit El and I. Vayet ol holo. And he pitches a tent. Ahalo. Chazal say here, we learned from Avram's great midos. He pitches whose tent first? Sarah Imenu. And whose tent second? His. Wait a minute. Here's the question. Why are they in separate tents? I thought they're married. And then the question gets further complicated. In their next stop, which is Mitzrayim, Avram famously says, Imri na achotiat. Why in the world would Avram say such a thing? That you're my sister. In fact, he's harshly reprimanded by Paro, the representative of evil himself. And he says to him, Paro says to him, look, hine ishtecha kach valeich. This woman is your wife. I tried to have relations with her. She smote me and Hashem smote me. She smote me using angels, and Hashem gave me horrible disease that rendered me physically impossible for me to touch Sarah, even to lay a finger on her. You now must realize that by saying that she's your sister, you did a terrible thing, he says to Avram. And therefore, it says, Lama amarta chotihi ve'ekach oso li li'isha. Ekach li li'isha, that's marriage. Ve'ata hine ishtecha kach v'leich. She's your wife. She's not your sister. Why are you behaving this way? Well, let's go back to the very beginning of the Parsha. This is going to open your eyes tremendously. There was one person who existed in the entourage of Avraham Avinu who could have been considered the son and the heir. Who was that? Obviously, Lot. Lot is Avram's closest of kin. It is his brother-in-law. It is both his nephew and his brother-in-law. She's the brother of Sarah, and he also is the son of his brother Haran. If there's anything genetically close to a child that Avram and Sarah could share, this is as close as you're going to get without a biological son. I'm sorry, they're sharing genes from two brothers, right? And it's just can't get any closer than Lot. And what was Lot? What was his role when they left? So the Zohar Kodesh says is that they lived separately when they were in Haran. And now they're entering Eretz Yisrael. And what does it say? It says, Vayelech Avram kasher diber alav Hashem. Hashem told him all these great things are going to happen. The next word is, who do you think should be the person who comes next? Vayelech Avram kasher diber Hashem. And who should he take with him? His wife. But that's not what it says. It says, Vayelech ito Lot. The first person on Avram's bandwagon who got the front seat of the bus was Lot. The Avram ben Chamesh Shanim v'Shivim Shana b'Tzeisa Mecharan. It seems to be saying he was 75 years old. He means he's been married for a minimum of 20 years, if not 50 years. Okay? And then in the next pasuk, after describing this long life that he had in Haran, in which he had no children, Vayikach Avram es Sarai ishto ve'et Lot ben Achiv ve'et kol rechusham. All of a sudden, we see that Sarai is introduced and then Lot. But Vayelech ito Lot comes first. It seems that he has primacy. Now look what happens after they go to Mitzrayim. We know that in Mitzrayim, Lot did something very good. When Avram said, Imri na chotiat, say that you're my sister, Lot could have said, and justly so, what are you talking about? She's my sister. I'm the one who's going to marry her off. You're not her sister. You're her uncle. You're her uncle. And you're both of our uncles. So you're not the guy calling your shots here, Uncle Abe, Uncle Abraham. I'm calling the shots here, and I should be rewarded richly for giving away my sister in hand to marriage. And he didn't say anything. Vayelech ito Lot. He figured that anything that goes to Avram is anyway going to go to him. So why speak up? Also, somewhat altruistically, he was able to be kovesh for the moment, his lust for wealth, and say, no, first Abraham. And for that, he was rewarded tremendously. But then the problem started. Look at the next pasuk when they're coming out. Vayal Avram Mitzrayim. Avram comes back. And what does he do? Who should be the first one he takes? Lot, right? The first one he took when he left Haran. And the first one it said he should take going back from Egypt. No, it says who? V'ishto. V'kol asher lo. Not only is Lot not up front in the front seat anymore, but he's got all this other stuff that he's carrying around. And then where's Lot? What happened to Lot? V'lot imo. Not ito, but imo. Imo. What is the difference between ito and imo? Imo means you're with me. You're part of my entourage. Very nice. You're part of the inner circle. Ito means you're my primary person that's closest to me, right? It's switched. it switched. Somehow something happened in Mitzrayim that Sarai replaces Lot as Avram's number one. What was that? Easy to understand. It was the incident that happened with Paro. If indeed Hashem was fine with the fact that Avram might have another wife, a concubine, or somebody else that he'll marry along the way, and they'll be the fulfillment of the prophecy. Avram didn't know. Avram could have said, I don't know from whom I'm going to have the child. And in fact, Hagar produces Yishmael with him, and that's the first child. And he says, Lu Yishmael Yichil Fanecha. We're still suffering from that today. The Lu Yishmael Yichil Fanecha is the bane of our existence because Avram included him in Yerushas Eretz Yisrael. So now we have a problem. But Sarai, by this miraculous validation of Hashem, and Avram seeing her enormous power, listened to Sarah. And eventually he would have to listen to Sarah, right? Sarah had his ear and convinces him to rid himself of Lot. He had to listen, not what he understood, not what he observed, and not what his own personal agenda, running his own affairs. If he were running his own affairs, he would have taken Lot and made him his heir, and that's the end of it. Hashem wanted to show Sarah is your wife in every sense of the word. And maybe that's why Avram says to Paro, says to Sarah, Imrina achotiyat, please tell him you're my sister, not my wife. You know why? Because he treated her like a sister. He put a separate tent for her. According to Zohar Kadosh, he didn't live with her as man and wife. And the pasuk seems to say, now I know your beauty. And the Zohar again doubles down and says he never saw her. He never saw her up close. He really didn't know. He respected her tznius as a brother and a sister. It wasn't a lie. It's an incredible thing. Avram wasn't lying. It was a small lie. But for all intents and purposes, Avram and Sarah, Avram and Sarai, until they get down to Mitzrayim, are brother and sister. It's not a stretch at all. Helps you understand everything about why Avram would say such a thing. Because that was the reality. It was the truth. It was the truth. They lived as brother and sister. I think Lahavdol Zillion Havdalos, there's a sect, a Protestant sect, I think it's called the Shakers, not the Quakers, but the Shakers, or something along those lines, right? And they get married, and they have a child, but then the rest of the time they live as brother and sister. There's no such thing. That's usher. Torah says beferish share ksus va'ona. If there's not intimacy and not love and physical intimacy, that's just not permissible. It's not permissible. It's not a marriage. Garnish been garnished. Yeah, you can have mechila, but the right is embedded. You want to deal with it the way you want to deal with it. That's your issue. That's the issue between the two of you. But halachically, that's an obligation. Avram didn't know that. Why would Avram not respect Sarai enough? He says, hey, look, obviously we're not meant to have children. It says Sarah ein la valad. She was created without a womb. Zohar Kodesh says that too, and the Medrash Tanchuma says it. She didn't even have the apparatus to have a child. Hashem actually gave her that when he transfers her name from Sarai to Sarah. And by the way, where does that yud go? Where does the yud, there are a lot of drashim about this, where does that yud end up? It ends up on Yehoshua, Hoshea ben Nun. Why Yehoshua? Because Yeshua is the key to the conquest in Yerusha of Eretz Yisrael. That's why. You understand? She gives her yud over to Yehoshua because she is going to create the only Yoresh, and she made sure to boot Lot. Now, it says that when Avram separates from Lot, that Hashem's nevuah comes back to Avraham. Because Kolzman that the Russia, the Medrash says, as long as the Russia Lot was present, Hashem wouldn't speak to him. What do you mean? Hashem spoke to him a lot. He said, Lech lecha. Okay, maybe that happened in Haran, but then he gets nevuos when he enters in Shechem and in Beit El, and he builds mizbeachs. Lot was there. Why are you How could you say that Hashem didn't speak to Abram when Lot was there? The answer is there were two transformations that took place in Mitzrayim. One of Sarai, and one of Lot. Lot turned into a Russia when exposed to the riches of Mitzrayim. He was seduced and fell into the, how shall I say, the spirit of Tuma that existed there. There's a vort. One of the Hasidic Rebbes says, and I don't want to misquote. He says when it says by Avram, Imrina Achotiat, and he says, "Oh, hinene yadati kisha yifasmar." I know that now you're a beautiful woman. How come all of a sudden he noticed she's a beautiful woman? So like I should say, she had to pick up her clothing to cross water, or whatever it might be, with a reaction of people to her. He says, no. Avram entered a realm of Tuma known as Mitzrayim, where it's Shtufei Zima, the whole place, as the Torah itself says, Shtufei Zima, the Zima, the immorality is in the air. It's like a syrup that you're immersed in. Even Avram was affected, and he started to notice her beauty. Can you imagine? The great Avram, who was so pure and so holy, even he experienced the downgrade of his holiness and personal kedusha just by being in Mitzrayim. Something to think about for all our friends in the diaspora. We don't really know the impact that being in a place has on us. It's very powerful. One must be concerned. We're not as the Rambam says, Adam is drawn after his sviva, and a sviva that's not the greatest sviva does have an impact. How much of an impact you have to see, but even if it's a little bit of impact, it's still significant. So Lot transformed into if Sarai became Ishto, the real wife of Avram, that he understood that the child that he would eventually have would be through her. Now, Sarai later gives Hagar to Avram, thinking maybe that's what it means through her. And her intention was, as Chazal tell us, that by doing this tremendous act of being mizalzel herself and giving away her precious husband to a slave, that alone would give her the merit to have a child. And in fact, when Hagar does become pregnant, Sarai destroys the fetus, because that was never the intention. He didn't mean for Hagar to have children with Avram. That was never the intent. It was an act of sacrifice that she thought in that merit she would be remembered. And of course, that's an enormous point. Look, we don't have a time right now to go into the separation of Ishmael, but you could argue that Sarai was responsible for the removal of two potential fathers of Klal Yisrael, Avos, one being Ishmael and previously Lot, her own brother. What happened to Lot is that he got bit by the lust for money. And by the way, according to Rabbi Nachman, lust for money, which leads to gaiva, will lead to sexual morality, because a person thinks that everything is theirs and they can take whatever they want, and they disregard what's holy boundaries that a person has. They want to take everything for themselves. So the lust for money and wealth is very, very connected to znus and to immorality. Okay, so she recognized this, and that was part of the process, part of the painful process of purification of Avram and Sarah, whose child would be a complete and total miracle. A complete and total miracle to the extent that Sarai had no capacity for birth, and she was given it. Avram, even the Midrashim say, Tanchumai says that he had no capacity for birth. And that's why Hashem had to remove them from their istagnusa, as I'll tell us, from their astrology, we know, based on the Ramchal and the Rambam, that Hashem does send his signals of hashgacha pratis to the world through the heavenly bodies and his angels. So that's like a giant computer that's shining down Hashem's will into the world, and the world will conform to it. So according to the original, birth influences, so to speak, of Avram, who himself, by the way, was a master in every field of Ovid Kochavim. He knew everything. It says he knew every sort of idol worship that existed, but in searching for Hashem. And that was the big mistake of the generation of Enosh, to start worshiping Hashem's messengers. These messengers are just messengers. They present Hashem's will to the world, but they are not the person to pray to. They're just messengers. So the energy that was created at your time of birth didn't leave in their mahus, in their hishavus that Hashem made them with capacity to have children. So Hashem says, fine, I'm going to change it. I'm going to start all over again. Starting all over again is exactly what Avram Avinu does. This is amazing. Leaving Mitzrayim, where does Avram go? He goes back to Beit El, the specific place that he put a separate tent for Sarah. He goes back there and says, I was wrong. We're starting this all over again. We're going to start the journey of Lech Lecha from scratch. When I left Haran, there was a problem. There was a deviation. There was Lot. It was a mistake. Now he goes back to the beginning and goes back to Ai and pitches a tent, which would develop into the famous tent of Sari Menu, where the Shechina was Shara, and that can only be when there's a harmony and a beautiful marriage between a man and a woman. That's where the Shechina is Shara. It wasn't when she was living separately in Ai. So this is the secret of what really happened here in this parsha. Sarai is identified and moves from being the sister of Avram to the wife of Avram Avinu. She was never his wife. Imrina Achotiat. That's what she really was until now. And Lot was never going to be the true heir of Abraham. Once he was tested by going through Mitzrayim, he ends up Nebuch in Stone, in the most debased place, similar to Mitzrayim. And unfortunately, he's there, although he has this spark of potential, which eventually, of course, will come out to his daughters and will give a spark to Mashiach ben David. He has merit because he did not speak Lashon Hara. Didn't speak Lashon Hara. That's a powerful merit. And therefore, he retained the spark. Okay, so let's hope that just like Avram listened to Sarah and understood, her role shifted from being something less significant to ultra significance, so too our newly elected leader of the free world should listen to the voices of Hashem as Koresh did and not follow the path of Achashverosh. There are those who say that Trump is a Gilgal of Achashverosh, which means it just depends who has his ear. Haman has his ear, he's going to do good. He's going to do evil. And if Mordechai and Esther have his ear, he's going to do good. So let's just pray that he will listen, and he will follow the advice of the tzaddikim and of Am Yisrael, which means to not bow to the pressures of evil and to make decisions that are counter-indicated to the Yerusha of Eretz Yisrael, to Am Yisrael in total. Amen.
YIBONEH